Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another Tesla Motors Club podcast. I'm Mark,
I'm Lewis.
And I'm Mike.
and we want to thank you as always for joining us. Today, we got a lot of topics on deck. We'll see if we can get to them because Lewis has some things to say about a couple of these. So, one of the topics we'll talk about is Tesla and the future of energy production. Mike for sure has some things to say about this. I think Mike and Lewis, just wait. It's going to be great. We're also going to talk about the 4680 structural pack. That's been a hot topic for many months, and we got some more information about that. Sandy Munro did his thing. We're also going to talk about some Tesla layoffs yet again. This time dealing with autopilot data labeling employees. Lewis will kind of give us some insight about that. I'll say something a little bit about the smell of the AC because there's lots of conversation about that. We have viewer comments and we got a lot more. So just strap in because episode 15 starts now. As I said, welcome again. These two beautiful, handsome beings here, Mike and Lewis. I tell you, man, this is the highlight of my Sunday. Is seeing y'all's beautiful faces, man. How you doing today?
I'm not sure I can live up to that intro, but I'll give it a try.
I mean, Mike, come on. I mean, come on. You just what you bring to this podcast. I was saying this before we started is that Lewis and Mike, you guys are great at you know what you like, you know what you want, and you love Tesla, you like EVs, you like the world, you have your things that you want to say, and when you speak it, like we talk about this energy production, you bring out your skills, and I think people would learn a lot from that. I'm definitely going to learn a lot from you about this, guys. But I know I'm putting the cart before the horse. Let me just stifle myself and slow down. Lewis, you doing good with the car? Everything's great.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
What's your FSD score so far?
I've managed to get it up to 91, so I'm getting closer.
Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, he has a Plaid Model S. So
right.
That's it's
I
difficult.
started it in
He's
the 60s.
doing well. He's doing well.
So I've been climbing.
It's difficult, but it's maintaining. Mike, what about yourself? Now, Mike is also trying to get into the FSD thing. So what's your score, Mike?
I'm at a 94.
That's impressive. In LA, that's impressive. I haven't done it yet. Because y'all are encouraging me maybe to get back into it. I don't know. All right. So as I said earlier, the 4680 batteries is a really big deal, and for a lot of people, and I think it's fantastic for Tesla because it just shows where their strengths are. Like anybody can make a car, but the proof is in the battery, in the technology, and I think the 4680 batteries are really a good leap. I'm sure Mike and Lewis will agree with me on that. So who wants to take this before? Because both you guys can have some similar thoughts about it. So who wants to jump in and talk about the 4680 batteries?
Well, you got two things. You got two things to talk about on the battery pack. One is the pack design itself. It's a structural battery now. It's just not a slab bolted to the bottom of the car.
Right.
The second item is the design and engineering that went into the battery itself. Tesla put a whole lot of time and effort into a complete redesign of the chemistry that went into these batteries. And when you get into the nitty-gritty detail, it's awfully impressive what they've done. But I think we should start with structural. I mean, Tesla's taking.
I like that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla took something that was, and for most manufacturers, is a bolt-on, or they drop it onto the floor, they put it in the trunk, or wherever they found space, and hook some wires up and say, "Here's your battery pack." And they said, "No, we're actually going to make a casting. We're going to design this pack to be part of the frame, for lack of a better word. It's going to be an integral part of the car. It is removable, although." It seems to take an awful lot of work to get it out,
right?
But it is removable. And at the same time they did all this, and if you watch the Monroe video, they took a look at all the electronics and completely went through that and cleaned it up and optimized and redesigned bits and pieces. And they actually borrowed a lot of electronics from the S. So now they're taking the scale and they're going, well, yeah, we built a lot of Model Ys and we built a lot of Model S's, but if we can make the parts common, we can really get a volume of scale going here. And that's pretty impressive. I gotta say, Tesla's flexing a little bit with their design skills there.
Right, and for me, this is where, and we make a clarification that the 4680 is a cell. It is a collection of cells in a battery. That's what the 4680 is. So
they're using round cell technology, which has been their go-to design for
yeah, it's
a long
kind of
time
like it's
now.
kind of like what's in this thing. It's kind of like these little guys, but a little bit different,
Well,
different size.
Just take that and make it a whole lot bigger.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty phenomenal what they've done. They changed the cathode technology and the chemistry involved. They've gotten rid of, or they've reduced some of the toxic chemicals that normally would be in a battery pack considerably. So props to them for taking care of that and actually paying attention to the details.
Yeah, and I think again that's this is where Tesla shines, like you mentioned, is that their technology in the battery chemistry, because they've been doing it for years. And to me, Tesla's like the Netflix of cars. It's like Netflix came out with the subscription. It's like no one's going to subscribe. It's going to subscribe to some streaming service. Who's going to do that? Now everyone's jumping over themselves to do it. So now Tesla are saying, look. Here, this is why we are the ish. This is why we are the top dogs. Is because look at our technology. Look at where we brought this battery chemistry. Look at where it's going. Now we've integrated to the car where it's more structurally sound. The production costs can be lower, and so you're going to have a nice, solid, a better kind of a car. It's not just a bolt-on like the was it the Volvo you mentioned?
Yeah,
Mike?
Polestar is an ICE car that's been converted.
Yeah, so it's not just some Frankenstein machine. Is actually they're thinking about, okay, the battery goes here,
Well,
this helps that out, and this helps that out.
And let's actually push it a little further. They've taken their energy density, they've increased the density, they've reduced the size of the pack, they've reduced the weight, they've increased the range. That's all good stuff, and it's a lot of hard work to do that. But
yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Mike. It's very impressive what they've done. I think the structural design of the pack is incredibly innovative. I guess I want to say
that's a good way to put it. I would agree with that. I didn't see any
other car company even considering to do something like that. Now it certainly leads to some challenges that they have to overcome, and I think that there are some signs in the design were like, oh, that this tooling was wrong, or these seals didn't line up, or stuff like that they're already working to improve. The seats, being attached to the actual case of the battery. So like you can't just remove the battery. You remove the battery, you're pulling the seats, the floor mat, the carpeting, the center console.
It is removable. But it takes some work.
You're pulling a lot of stuff out, but I mean it is really impressive. I think the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of times when people are talking about all these advancements or improvements to the 4680 battery cells and things like that, it's all relative, right? In the sense of the cells themselves do have a lot of improvements over the 2170s or some of the older battery cells out there. But like when you talk about things like range of the car, the range of the car is really a function of like how much power does it have versus how much power does it take to operate the weight, all that kind of stuff. So while the 4680s allow them to have more range, it's also very possible that Tesla just goes, well, we're not going to put as many cells in, so the range isn't any longer, right?
Right.
Just because this
but that's
battery
less
is
weight
there
to drag around.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that you have more, more range. You could have more range. It also just means that maybe it's cheaper, more efficient, things like that for Tesla. I feel like most of the advantages of the 4680 are actually for Tesla and less for the consumer themselves having the car, because it's price reduction, manufacturing improvements, costs, things like that. They don't necessarily need as many cells, all that kind of stuff. But again, that being said, new technology, new cell manufacturing. There have been road bumps. Elon even admitted, things aren't perfect yet. They've got a lot of improvement to do, which is why it's kind of been a slow ramp. These 4680s, they originally were planning on these batteries, for example, being available for the Plaid, which came out over a year ago. That was the rumored idea of the Plaid Plus, and that didn't happen. They scrapped that car, and also just like these batteries are right now only in one model of the Model Y, only made in Giga Texas, because they're having challenges in how they ramp up that manufacturing, that production. I think if you start seeing these batteries when they start using them at the Giga Berlin plant, and you start having them available into other models, we'll start seeing more benefit, to most people. But certainly, I think it's a huge innovative leap, and I think it's really impressive, especially what Monroe and Associates showed and how they're doing things. But I mean, there's lots of cool stuff with the battery that's different. Like, so I saw a teardown video of the cell itself, and like, so for example, a 2170 cell, the outer shell, like the can of the cylinder itself, is about 100 microns thick. These, because they're structural, they're about 600 microns thick.
Yeah.
So they're like way thicker and way sturdier than what the older cells were. And then there's a lot of interesting things in how they weld them together, and how they they do the packs and stuff, and how they structure them together. And Mike hit the nail on the head. One of their best innovations is how they leverage the parts between the different models and how they're able to reuse some of those electronics. But yeah, so it's a really interesting and great, again, innovative technique, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves. I think they're going to improve it. I think they're going to get better at it. I think eventually it will lead to better ranges, faster charging. It seems to already be doing faster charging, so that'll be awesome.
So to leverage what Lewis just said, I'm going to throw some numbers out for the geeks in the group. These new cells, so they're physically bigger. They are a little bit bigger, but with the size increase, they're getting a 5 times improvement in energy storage. So even though the cell is a little bigger, they've really increased the amount of storage because of how they're constructing the cell and how they're working with the silicon, because they are a silicon cell. Each cell has 16% more range available if you just want to look at a single cell and you want to measure it out. That 16% is how they cut back on the number of cells. Between the density and the range, you don't need as many cells to go the same amount of distance you went with the old pack, which is that's all good. Yeah, I mean, it costs less money to put the pack together. You get the same range. You haven't given up anything. That's a plus. That's a win. I'm sure there's a group of people say, well, I'd rather have more range. I want my 500 miles like the Rivian has.
Exactly.
But I drive a Model 3 with short legs, and the one thing I'll say about having short legs, it charges really fast. So I'm not sitting there for a long time charging a battery that's going to take me 500 miles. So I guess it's a trade-off.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that they'll eventually leverage more of the range that you get out of it.
I think
the
will.
Real challenge right now is they can't make enough of them. Like, they physically cannot make the batteries fast enough.
Aren't these the same cells going into the trucks also?
I
think so. Yeah,
expected to be what goes into the truck.
That's
I'm kind of wondering.
said.
I'm surprised at why I got these actually, and they didn't keep them all for the big trucks that they're trying to get out the door.
I mean, I think part of it, right, is they want to get real road tests.
Right.
So our Model Y with these are actually a beta test.
You're beta testing the batteries. Yeah. I mean, so far it's been going really well. A lot of the reports coming in, people are happy with them. So
I mean, people think the Model Y, it looks like an overgrown cockroach, but it's a test, so I'll take it.
Harsh.
Hey, so there's a member on the thread we're talking about here, Sleepy Doc, and he's quoting from someone, Bob 2C. He says, Bob 2C says exactly. But what really do these new batteries have over the current ones that have a proven record other than more efficiency and cheaper for the manufacturer? Well, Sleepy Doc says, you say more efficiency like it's nothing. That's one of the major goals of battery design, since the inefficiencies in the battery packs cause all sorts of other problems. Decreased available power, decreased regenerative braking, heat regeneration that degrades the battery and requires the energy spent to cool the battery pack. I think that's a pretty good comment that he made.
So efficiency, one of the car manufacturers made a point that efficiency is the holy grail of an EV. As a package. I mean, between the aerodynamics, between the batteries, between the motors, between everything, efficiency is the holy grail. Because the more efficient the vehicle is, the further it's going to go with the least amount of energy.
Right.
So,
and I mean, and even if it wasn't more efficient, I mean, it is. I think everyone agrees it is more efficient, which is just a huge win across the board. But even if it was purely a cost reduction, that would also be a huge benefit. Because either the cars are going to be cheaper, so more people can afford them and buy them and get benefit of having a Tesla, or they're going to be able to put more money into other areas of the car to improve various aspects of it, right? So even if it was only a cost savings for Tesla, it's still a win. But I think the efficiency and all the other benefits, it's going to lead to massive improvements across the board as the technology gets developed more and it gets more widely used. And I mean, it also puts a lot of more power into Tesla, right? Because yes, Tesla makes their existing cells, sort of. They have partnerships with companies. This is literally, these cells are manufactured in their own building, with their facility. They have more direct control over what's happening.
Tesla is one of the few companies that does that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty vertical compared to a lot of the other manufacturers of EVs, and that they've kind of taken a page from Apple in that sense. They've looked at it and said, well, if we own top to bottom the stack, and we have a vertical market, we can control every piece of that to our desires, and that's a smart way to do it when you're talking to something that's complicated.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like I said, I think this is great that Tesla have finally got these batteries out, because there's been rumors. Where is it coming? Why is it doing this? And I know it's only done in Texas, right? Because Fremont isn't tooled up yet for it. So did they mention that they were going to tool up Fremont to do it, or are these only going to be the ones that are made in America? Are they only going to be done in Texas, or will they eventually go to Fremont as well?
I'm not sure that they'll ever do it. I mean, it's possible that they may eventually upgrade Fremont to be able to support it. I'm pretty certain that Giga Berlin is planning on it.
Yeah.
But I guess you have to keep in mind that the challenges are for the foreseeable future, and this is true in industry wide. There are not enough batteries.
Right.
You cannot make enough batteries. So for them to do the work to shut down the old battery production, bring it up, and all that kind of stuff, I don't see that happening in even the next year or two.
Right,
Probably not. And the existing batteries, you have to understand, it's not like they're garbage, right? It's not like current Teslas on the road that don't have 4680s are horrible cars.
Right.
They're amazing pieces of technology. There is a lot of value to them. And there's a lot of engineering that's gone into it. There was Sandy Munro, they did a teardown of the Plaid's battery pack, and they looked at it, and the Plaid's battery pack it's not even using the 2170s. It's using the original batteries from back when the Roadster first came out, over a decade ago. And those battery cells, they've done all these advanced things to get the power output to make the car amazing, right? So don't think that your Teslas without 4680s are bad. They're very capable. And I don't see Tesla shutting down making those cells anytime soon, because they just need more cells, period. And I think they're going to limit where the 4680 batteries go in the near term, because the production struggling. As they enhance production, they get it ramped up more and more. They'll probably transition more cars and more vehicles over to 4680. But again, the older battery cells, they're not even physically making them themselves in a lot of cases. They're buying them from Panasonic and LG and other types of manufacturers. So there's no harm in them just continuing to do that in addition to.
And back to your Fremont comment, I don't think Fremont's ever going to be making the structural battery pack unless there's some major changes that take place. And the reason I say that is because to make that casting takes a very special piece of equipment, of which Tesla has two. So I'm not sure Fremont's in the loop to get one of those pieces of equipment to make that casting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Fremont has the setup to even support it. They would have to do a massive overhaul of the factory there. So I don't think Fremont will ever do it. But I mean, again,
could be surprised, but
who knows what'll come in the future? Maybe 2 or 3 years from now they might do something like that. But I think in the near term they're looking at ramping up their existing production at the existing factories.
We were talking about efficiency, and I just looked up a number to make sure I quote it correctly. And you're going to like this, Mark, because I'm a geek. I like details. So the battery pack that's not structural for the Y takes over 70 components. The structural pack, the frame, reduces that 70 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's efficiency in manufacturing. Maybe not efficiency in your car, but certainly efficiency in manufacturing. So.
Sure, it's definitely a cost balancing initiative, right? It's based on how when does the economics go in the favor of, hey, let's redo the factory, hey, let's change who the production lines are, and eventually that point may come. But again, at this point, like Tesla doesn't want to slow down at all. They physically cannot make cars fast enough.
Right.
Yeah, no
So
kidding.
they don't want to do anything to disrupt that.
My December delivery date tells me that.
And keep in mind, they have better margins on their cars than any major auto manufacturer out there. So like, it's in their interest to keep pumping out cars as fast as they can. The iterative improvements and things that they do, they will continue to do that. But the like big revolutionary improvements, it's so much easier to do that when you build a new factory than it is to retrofit an old factory. It's really hard,
for sure.
really expensive.
For sure.
It takes a really long time.
For sure.
So like they'd almost be more inclined to build a new factory than to revamp the Fremont to fully support all the things that, you know, Giga Texas has.
Yeah.
At least in the experience that I've seen working in other manufacturing industries, a lot of times that's what happens.
My man Chris said, "Hey, how can I switch to 4680 batteries?" Like, Chris, hey, you got to buy a new one, the new Model Y, man. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So
flip your current car.
Yeah,
and buy a new
flip it.
Model Y.
Yeah, flip it. So, you know, kind of on the heels of this, and we'll talk about some smelly things after this. But there's a few friends I know who people hate Tesla. They're Tesla haters. So people say, oh, you know, your car, like I was with some friends the other day, like, oh yeah, you know, Tesla, it may be zero emissions, but look at all the diesel fuel that they use to dig them and mine the lithium, you know, all that stuff is, I'm like, okay, so maybe to kick the can down the street, but at some point you have to, there's going to be some type of way, you got to mine it some kind of way. So they complain that, well, you know, all this lithium is hurting our environment. I said, well, you know, if more people thought that was a big issue, I think it would, less people would buy the cars. They would probably buy something that's like more safer, you know, or whatever. But that's the first thing that they say is that, you know, Elon is the Antichrist. They'll say that. Then they say, well, you know, you got to mine all the lithium and your car is not really zero emissions. I said, well, you know, the car is zero emissions, but it does take some emissions to get the lithium. Sure. But no one is saying that's not the case. I mean, it is what it is, you know.
Maybe they're worried about all the rubber dust that, you know, my tires are grinding off. Or
man, you know, I can talk about that stuff forever. But before I get my piece of meat out and talk about the energy about Tesla, let me kick a little PSA out there about the HVAC smell. It's a particular issue in Model 3s, and there's been lots of some of our listeners here and viewers who frequent the Tesla Motors forum have seen this in the general section in the Model 3, and it is an issue. It's an issue in the Model 3 in the design. You know, a lot of us think it's in the design of where the intake is under the hood. You can get leaves in it, and you get all types of debris in there, and it settles down in there, and then you add a little moisture, a little whatever, and then you got a nice little hodgepodge of bacteria happening.
Yeah, a little compost
nice
going.
petri dish.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of people on Reddit, TMC, that says, oh, I got the one-all fix. You know, you got to spin your head around. You got to put this in the car, turn it on for 17.2 seconds, not 17.3 seconds, and then you buy this snake oil stuff that goes into the microbial zap-a-dap-a-doo, and then after that, your car smells better. And then you got people out here buying all this esoteric stuff and getting this stuff together, and then it's like, oh, yeah, it smells great. Then like next week, 2 weeks later, hey, the smell's back. So
Go figure.
There are preventative measures that you can put in place to do these things. I think microbial air filters and all this kind of nonsense doesn't necessarily do it. The main issue is bacteria gets onto the coils, and then you get a warm, moist environment. They grow. They love that area. If you use your AC on manual, you know, you turn it up, whatever, and then you just turn the car off, and it shuts off. Well, then if you're out in the sun and the heat, the bacteria, like, oh, you know, it's just giving it energy to feast on all those dirt, dust, and bits. So when you get back in the car, and the air intake is blowing air through that across those coils, now you're smelling that. So your $40, $50 microbial air filters you put in there, you're like, well, dang, these things ain't doing much, because now 2 weeks later the smell is back. it's not that, it's from there. So one thing that I do, and I've had 2 Teslas, is that I've never had the smell. Um, I had an older car. It was an $80,000 SUV, Infinity, and it had it. I smelled it a little bit. But the point is, what I do is just that I run the air. I run my car in auto. So when it's in auto, it's cycling on and off. The compressor kicks in. It cools the air. When it gets to a temperature, it cuts it off. There's always air flowing across it, not always cold air. It's okay to have just room temperature air going across it to keep things at bay. And one thing you can do out there, people in TV land, is that if you can remember to just turn your AC off, just let the air flow, the outside air flow across the coils to kind of dry it up. You will smell less of that sock smell, the vomit smell that Danny mentioned. He's a producer here. The vomit. You'll smell less of that, and you'll have more of a fresher car. I keep my car on auto. I don't have an issue with the smell. But there's tons of articles or threads on it, and I just wanted to just kind of make a PSA about it. That for me, how I'm in LA, so it's always hot here, but I don't necessarily park on the street. I will admit that I park in garages because where I work is in a garage, and I live in a garage. I have a garage here, so I'm not always out under trees and things. But I don't get the leaves and stuff. But I still am out in the heat and the humidity sometimes, and for me, having it on auto just doesn't make the smell happen. So I just wanted to say that, put it on a platter, and just say that, and just maybe someone can just try it and say, oh, you know what's not? It's free, it's cheap. There's no special stuff to buy. Just try that, and just try to remember to cycle just your vent and be good. Lewis hasn't had this problem because he's got the Plaid. It's got bio.
Never heard of
bio.
this issue.
Yeah, it's got bio mode or whatever.
Bioweapon defense mode.
Yeah, so you don't have that issue, but a lot of Model 3 people do have the issue. Mike, do you experience it often in your car?
I have not, and I was thinking as you were talking that I tend to change my filters more often than most,
Right.
because I live in a fire zone.
Right.
And for the last 5 years, we've had fires, a significant amount of fires. And people don't realize that when you're driving to work or around and there's a fire, you're picking up a lot of ash.
Yeah.
And I've pulled out filters that are only 6 months old that are just covered. So I tend to be changing those pretty regularly. I would think, though, the folks in, like, let's say Atlanta, where you've got high humidity.
Oh my gosh.
Houston, high humidity.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's a big deal. Here in the West Coast, not such a big deal. We have a dry heat. That's what they like.
Which I love. I love. I'm from the South, and I love it, man.
Yeah. So I could see where it could be a real problem, but I have not experienced it with my 2019.
Yeah. So a lot of people. There's a lot of new people that come on, and whatever car they had before, and a lot of us think, just in our personal opinion, that the way the intake is designed there's an area for it. Now, Tesla, at one point, this was a couple years ago, they mentioned that there's a software update that would run the fan. I'm not sure if it does it or not because I've never heard it. And a lot of people in the comments, just what I've read over the years and months.
So let me throw this to you. Okay, I'm gonna take your ball and I'm gonna flick it back to you. Okay. So one thing I do that not everybody does is I've got the auto temp control on my car.
Right.
So during the day it keeps the car about 95 degrees max, which means the AC is running all day.
Right.
Whether I'm in the car or not. I'm curious if that may kind of help. The other thing I would say is pay attention to your car when you pull out of the driveway on a hot day. If you don't see a trail from the humidifier, all the condensation, you might want to check the drain hole, make sure it's not clogged. Because I have seen that a problem on some other cars.
Yeah.
If the water can't get out, then it's just going to sit there.
Yeah. Yeah. We got some viewers coming in, like Doug says he doesn't hear the fan running. And so I'm not sure if it even does that. But granted, like I said, my method, I just keep it on auto and I don't have an issue at all, So if anyone is listening, even after this is aired live, if anyone is listening and they want to comment on it, just send us comments over to the podcast section TMC and let us know what you think about it. And if someone has questions about it, we can talk about it later. But it's just a little quick thing I just wanted to mention because it's the summer, the height of the summer's coming here, and people are going to experience this more and more and more, especially new people who just are getting into Model 3s and things. I think the Model Y has a biofiltered thing too, right? So they don't, I don't think they have
They
this
might have
issue.
fixed the design with the Model Y. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think they have the issue, but it is a definite concern, you know. But anyway, moving on from that. So there's been a lot of things in the news about Tesla, and some of our listeners may know that Tesla aren't just about cars. It's about solar panels. It's about power walls, mega packs. It's a large scale industry storage for power plants, you know, which is what mega packs is. So one of the things that's been in the news a lot is the future of energy. And there's two pieces to this. The first one is the analysis concerned about how Russia can affect the supply of natural gas to Europe, you know, and implications where that comes from, and how that trickles down to us here in the States, you know. And Lewis, this is before in the green room we were talking, and so Lewis was mentioning about his thing about nuclear plants. And in my mindset, there is a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding about nuclear plants, because we've seen stuff back in the day, like these old 50s TV shows where, you know, oh my gosh, nuclear spills, and you go into some monsters. So we have this kind of an uneducated, not all of us, but me, I will be the first to admit that I'm very uneducated about nuclear energy and how the technology has improved over the years. So Lewis has some thoughts about that, and so does Mike. So I'm trying to figure out who I want to start first. Okay, I want to do Mike. I want Mike first, because Mike is going to. I think what Mike's going. His comments are more sided with most people, I think, and then Lewis. Anyway, so Mike, tell us what do you think about the future of energy production here and the nuclear age that we're in.
Well, all right. So let's take a broad stroke approach at this.
Yes,
so
please.
On one side, you've got the issue with Russia and the interruption of the natural gas and the oil, and you have to include oil in that, not just natural gas. They are a big producer of oil.
Right.
On our side, on the North America side, U.S., we're having severe problems with hydropower right now, hydroelectric. We just don't have enough water to get hydroelectric power. And that was a big percentage of our clean energy. We do have some solar plants out, usually in the high desert, but not nearly enough. We have oil plants, we have natural gas plants, and we do have some nuclear plants, although we've decommissioned a few of them along the way. And with the interruptions of some of our more common energy, hydro, oil, you know, we're looking back at coal, we're looking back at nuclear. Should we actually keep the few we have left up and running for an extended period of time? You know, maybe build new ones. I mean, there's some discussion about building new ones. Technology is advanced. There's better tech than we had 30 years ago. You can look at San Onofre just down the coast here, and it looks like the Apollo spacecraft compared to what we're launching now. I mean, you know, tech has come a long ways. I'll grant you that. And this has been a pet thing of mine for years. I was telling everybody in the green room before the show, I was 12 and I was writing letters to my senators and my state representatives about nuclear power plants and some of the problems. Because even at 12, I could see the issue of not so much the tech, but it was the people building these plants were responsible and reporting to shareholders who wanted maximum profit. And that's in direct conflict with building something safe and reliable, because you're always under pressure to save a buck. And as soon as you start saving a buck, a corner gets cut. And unlike oil, coal, natural gas, cutting the corner may level a city block. If you cut a corner in a nuclear power plant, you've got much bigger problems that last a lot longer. So I was never a fan. Although the Navy did prove nuclear can be done and done safely. They've used it for years, and they've had very, very few issues.
Yeah, wasn't it on the aircraft carriers, on the Air Force? Didn't they
start with the subs? Rickenbach, actually, Nautilus, if I remember correctly, was the first nuclear powered sub, and it progressed from that. And when the Navy did it was built to very tight standards. Highly trained people ran it, and they had a lot of safeguards put in place, and it did work. Um, Compare that to the civilian world where it's for profit. The people may not be as highly trained, may not be as highly motivated. Um, it doesn't work quite as well, in my opinion. And that's what it is. It's an opinion.
Hmm.
And I'm sure Lewis has got a slightly different opinion.
So there's a debate over the future of the last nuclear plant here in California. It's in Diablo Canyon, and it's up in the Central Coast, and it supplies about 10% of our state's electricity, if I'm correct.
It's sizable. It's very sizable.
It's set to close by 2025, but a lot of officials, I should say, including some former secretaries of energy, have been weighing on why it needs to stay open. So Lewis has a different perspective on these things. And Lewis,
I'm not sure if it's different as it's a different focus.
Different focus, and Lewis he's engineering is his background, so he this is why I wanted him to just go at it, because he can bring a lot of things to the table that it's not just for the layman, but he can also for the geeks out there who dig this, he can be able to shed some light. So all right, Lewis.
All right.
I've thrown it your way.
So I guess just to give so obviously, I education-wise, I was physics and computer science, but in the military, I was actually part of civil engineering. I did power generation, power distribution, and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely have a certain take on it. It's real easy. I say build all the plants in California because I don't live there, right? No, but in all seriousness, I mean, here's the bottom line. So there's two areas of power, right? There's power generation, and then there's power storage. And
don't forget distribution.
Well, I mean, distribution exists, but my point is, like, there's different technologies developed for power generation. There's different technologies for power storage. Tesla kind of does a little bit of both with solar panels and battery packs and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if you look just holistically across, not even just our country, but the globe, there is no one technology that will satisfy the demand, period. So Absolutely. No matter what you want, we will need some combination of various forms of generating power. Solar will not work for the whole world. Wind will not work. Solar plus wind will not work. There's just physically isn't enough out there with the technology, again, that we have today to where that can pull it off. So at some point, you're going to need to generate additional power through, existing methods that we have, like coal, natural gas, oil, that kind of stuff. Now, nuclear power has a lot of stigma around it for some legitimate reasons. There are certainly legitimate reasons, but realistically, there's a lot of modern technology, a lot of advancements that have been made where it's not nearly as scary as people think it should be. But unfortunately, our country is kind of falling behind in the development of that, even though we kind of led nuclear power development, 70 years ago and on the earlier days of what was doing. We aren't really putting money into it because people are afraid of the technology. Now, there are some startups, there are some companies building smaller nuclear reactors and coming up with new innovative ways. But like nuclear as a whole, looking at the stats, is safer than the vast majority of massive amounts of energy production that we have. Coal and oil, all those things are constantly polluting. Nuclear is not. Yes, there's nuclear waste, but that waste is not as scary as most people think. And again, there are alternative types of reactors. Really, India, China, they're putting massive amounts of money into these, and I feel like their development of the technology will eventually trickle back over here, and we may benefit from it. But it's not all doom and gloom. Nuclear is not just automatically bad. I agree with Mike. There's a lot of negatives to the for-profit yada yada and corruption and cheaping out and things that happen there, which is why I think in our type of free market, when it comes to something that dangerous, regulations do make a lot of sense. That is important. But anyway, point still stands. There are alternate forms of reactor technologies, liquid salt reactors using different fuel sources like thorium, which is not a silver bullet, but there's some promise there. But even like, when you look at nuclear waste, what most people don't realize is the vast majority of nuclear waste actually isn't long-term. It isn't 10,000 years. It's be able to be reprocessed. It's able to be repurposed. It's a very small percentage that comes out that actually has to be long-term handled. So anyway, so that has a whole side of it. The other thing, though, just looking at it from a Tesla standpoint of, Elon did those interviews, a few months ago, over the last few months, about, talking about long-term, goals of like battery production, all these things they want to do. It is not feasible to use like Powerwall type battery, use lithium cells to do the battery storage required globally. It just isn't. Like, if you look at the numbers that he had in his interview, he was talking about things where you would need all of the production of all of the resources that we have going towards batteries, like times, 10x to even be able to handle the load of what we would need. So, I mean, there's a lot of other technologies out there with interesting ways of storing power, such as, like, Mike mentioned hydro. Reservoirs, pumping water into reservoirs and then using that to then generate hydro on demand as necessary. That's a very long, it's a very old technology that we've had for, centuries of how do we store power after a while, like storing water and then letting it flow.
That's a crucial understanding about power in general, is power is transitory. Unless you have a way to store it, you lose it.
Yeah,
correct.
And people don't really understand that well, I think, at least even today. They flip on their lights and they say, "Oh, I'm using electricity." Yeah, you are, because if you don't, it goes away. I mean,
yeah, power plants are literally constantly trying to generate just enough over what everyone right at that second is
at
using.
that moment,
at that exact moment, they're trying to generate that, and they're trying to ride that line, because anything extra they generate just is wasted. They're basically doing nothing with it. And if they go under, that's how you get things like brownouts and blackouts and stuff if they don't produce enough.
And I think that's driving Tesla's point about power walls and the microgrids that they're experimenting with P&G or PG&E up north, where you get that overage, you keep it in a battery or lots of batteries, and then you can release it later in the evening or later in the day, or whenever you get that line starting to dip, that you need some extra power.
Right.
In my mind, that's a smart way to do it. I mean, everybody's got a bare wall in their garage that they could put a battery pack on.
Again, the problem is making enough battery packs. So
I agree. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the high end, super duper batteries. I mean, they've already.
I think LFP is like a great example, right? Like
perfect
LFP batteries. For those who don't know, that's lithium iron phosphate batteries. That's why it's called LFP.
Cheap to make, easy to make.
They're very cheap. They're not as energy dense as some. The types of batteries they use in cars, and they're much heavier. So LFPs are kind of a bad technology to use in like your Tesla
can't put it
car.
in your car. Yeah.
But if it's just stationary in your house, it's actually a pretty good technology. Now, again, early technology, there needs to be a lot of development. So I think holistically looking at it, are we going to get away from oil and coal and all that immediately overnight? No. I think there's been a tremendous amount of effort to reduce coal, which has been awesome. Because coal does create a lot of emissions.
Yeah.
All right, but let's counter that. I mean, yes, it creates a lot of emissions, but the tech they're using today actually reduces that by a lot.
It does. It's way better than it used to be. It's not like it was 100 years ago.
I would say it's actually viable. If you wanted to put the money into the emissions control, and you didn't strip mine to get the coal, it's probably a viable.
I mean, the bottom line is, right, like anything that's a fossil fuel, no matter what, is carbon that is not currently in the atmosphere. No, it's not that. It's carbon that is not in the atmosphere, and you're releasing it into the atmosphere. So even if you release 0.00001% of the carbon, which you're never going to get there, it's still increasing the greenhouse gases, no matter what. You can't do, you will always do that, whether it's coal, oil, natural gas. There's no way to get around that.
We need that bridge right now.
Realistically, we need more solar, we need more wind and all of that. We need more hydro where it can happen. We need geothermal where it can happen. The problem is wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, they're all limited based on area and which parts of the world they can go in. Now, are we fully utilizing it to its best ability? No. There's tons of places that we could be adding a lot more. However, I don't see us with current technology ever in the near next 50 years, next 100 years, unless there's a huge breakthrough in physics, we're probably not going to get there. So we need something else. I think nuclear is a really good option to kind of carry a lot of that load. If it's done safely, if it's done with newer technologies. Again, there's a lot of ifs around it. I think that oil and coal and all of that, natural gas, is a stopgap measure that is not going away. We will need it to get there, because to build a power plant, it's not like you go, hey, I'm going to build a power plant, right? Like, it's even harder than building a Tesla factory. It's going to take 5 years, 10 years minimum, usually longer, and, you know, lots of money. So I think all of these power things that we have going on, we need to keep going, short-term solutions, but we need to be actively working on new technologies to advance stuff. I think all the, you know, again, solar that Tesla's doing is fantastic, and other companies, it's not just Tesla. The battery tech, I think Tesla's doing a lot to help push that development, and I hope that keeps happening. Power walls, I hope everyone gets power walls that can afford it. You know, I have Tesla solar power walls at my house. I think it's wonderful. So I definitely think that we should do that. But I also think we will absolutely need things like nuclear power in the long run, or we're just not going to meet the needs of the world, and we're going to be burning coal and oil for the next, you know.
So Lewis, what needs to
centuries.
happen? What needs to happen because at the end of the day, it's people like me who have no idea about nuclear power and thinks it's scary. So what needs to happen to educate the public so that we can be like, oh, you know what? This is great. And so why are we doing more of these? What do you think the first thing that the government, the powers that be need to do to make solar power, nuclear energy look better than what it is? Because it has a negative stigma to it.
So, I mean, I don't know. It's a hearts and minds campaign. So
Yeah.
it's like, how do you educate people to do
yeah.
that? I think to start, we probably, it's weird because as you can see, like, for example, with the politicians and stuff that are starting to make these comments, I think what's happening is they come out real strong, down with the nuclear plant, let's get rid of it. And then as they start being educated and show the details, they go, oh, crap, we can't actually do that. It's not really a feasible thing. And then they kind of backpedal on it and they start going. The problem is politicians will generally always bend the will of the people. So I think, I don't know, I think...
They bend
to some extent,
At
least publicly. Yeah, I mean, okay, tinfoil hat. But I mean, I think what we need, there already is money behind nuclear power, right? Like Bill Gates, you know, what's it called? Anyway, I can't think of his name now. Investor dude, can't think of his name.
Which investor, dude? We have
Warren
lots
Buffett.
of them.
Sorry, Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett.
Wow. They're all behind. They put money into nuclear power, right? Like, so there are big money interest into that space, and I don't think that's going away. But still, yeah, the average person definitely needs to. I don't know. It would be nice if there was more education for it in either schools or something. I have no idea. I am horrible at coming up with I haven't thought about how to solve that problem with society. But I mean, just to answer some questions here, I'm seeing some questions from the comments of the viewers, like Tesla solar and storage. Adam asked, do the hosts think that Tesla solar and storage can help provide the baseload power we'll need to replace nuclear and move to 100% renewables, or will nuclear always have a role? I absolutely do not think that Tesla solar and storage will be able to provide the baseload. I think everything they're doing is fantastic, but even if you did 100x of what they're doing right now,
it's not enough.
It's not enough. So I think that if you truly want to be quote unquote renewable and clean, as in not releasing more carbon, you will absolutely still need to do nuclear power in the long run.
I think that question right there points out one of the education challenges that we face. Is I don't think people appreciate just how much power is actually used across the board, not just your home. I mean, a lot of industry out there sucks up power in some astronomical numbers.
For sure.
And you also have to look at the transition to EVs, right? So there's a lot of things that in the next, 15, 20 years, they're not going to be able to sell new cars in many countries that are not,
that's right,
EVs. That is taking a huge power load on top of it. Plus, we have our normal infrastructure increases of energy. Every year, we use more energy than we did the previous year.
And
so I think that's a big part of the problem is, can you offset it? Can you help and minimize with solar and all those things? Yes. Will solar, wind ever be able to completely replace? Again, not unless we have a whole revolutionary technology. I mean, Dyson spheres. If we had solar in a Dyson sphere, boom, yeah, we're using solar.
Well, all right. If we had superconductors, for our distribution network,
exactly,
great. So yeah, I
don't see that stuff being feasible. Now, okay, Adam asked another question: is the point of Tesla megapacks to eventually replace nuclear and other baseload? They're not to replace the baseload. They're actually to replace the peak. So if you look at production of energy, there's like a base load that like there's always a minimum where you always have to generate that much power because it's just background of this much power is being used. But then when we have spikes due to like, you know, the temperature is high, and
everybody turns on their AC at
come
5
up, whatever,
o'clock.
Yeah.
you keep getting
Yep.
these spikes. Or like if you look at even during the day, right? This has to do with the whole why did they do daylight savings and all that nonsense. All the offices, when people go to work, they turn on their lights, the HVACs kick on, the power spikes at different times of the day just throughout based on weather and all these things. If you look at that stuff, you know, those spikes, the problem with that is if you have, for example, if you were only using nuclear power, you would have to have enough nuclear power to handle the maximum amount you need. You don't want to do that, right? Because you'd have nuclear plants just sitting around doing nothing all the time, and then you got to hit a button and turn it on, which is hard to do. That's where battery packs are amazing. That's where, you know, having reservoirs and doing a hydro, that helps make it easier. So your baseline power, which I think needs to be something big and beefy, nuclear, oil, coal, all that stuff that we have today is doing that. And then on top of it, we have additional like oil plants, natural gas plants that kind of spike turn on. We need to get rid of those, and the mega packs can replace that. So, let's see.
Yeah. I was reading what Crimson mentioned. Crimson was talking about, and they have nuclear there in Florida, but they're paying 7 cents for the first 1,000 kilowatts and 13 cents after. Wouldn't have anything else. So see, there's some people out there who like the nuclear and are embracing it, you know, and so more people like that.
Okay, you got to be real careful when you say he's embracing cheap power. He
Okay,
doesn't care
True.
where he's getting cheap power.
but he's not.
Power.
But he knows it's nuclear and he's okay with it.
Well, he's okay with the price for now.
But he knows it's nuclear. That's my point.
Yeah.
He didn't
what,
say
what happens? So those nuclear plants that he loves so much have a finite lifespan, and at some point they do have to be decommissioned. And when that decommissioning takes place, you have to have something to replace it. And there's a huge cost with these old plants on the decommissioning side. So,
But it's cheap.
His 7 cents a kilowatt is going to change radically at that time.
Yeah, but right now it's 7 cents a kilowatt for the first 1,000 and 13 cents after.
Long term.
And that's what
term.
matters. And
I love Doug's comment.
We're not looking at long term.
Blinky from The Simpsons. Don't eat him.
So
And to be clear, it's kilowatt hours. It's kilowatts over time. But
kilowatt hours, yeah. There you go. So Tesla sadly sadly to me, they've done some more layoffs. This time they're dealing with the autopilot data labeling section. So this sounds kind of interesting. You know, Lewis, tell us a little something about what that means, because this is kind of your wheelhouse too.
Yeah, I mean, it's layoffs are generally unfortunate, right? It makes
sure.
the news. People aren't happy about it. I'll quickly just say that most folks that were laid off have recovered. They have jobs at other companies. Some of them have gone to Rivian. Some have gone to, you know, Apple and Google and all the other stuff. So hopefully most of them and their families are fine. But yeah, I mean, Elon spoke about, I don't know what it was, a month ago or so, that they were going to be doing some layoffs. And yeah, they laid off a bunch of people. They were primarily in the autopilot team for data labeling. Now, to me, this is expected. I would see this, you know, this is a normal thing. What happens is whenever companies start with AI. So first of all, data labeling is just literally that. It's you look at some data and then you label it, but you put information on it. You use your human brain because we hopefully are smart and know things. So it's like you look at a picture. Whenever you do a CAPTCHA on a website, right? That's you actually data labeling. So when you look at a picture and you say, oh, here's a car, here's a thing, whatever. So now their data labeling was more sophisticated than that. But what happened was, I guess Tesla has been developing tools, right, as part of their autopilot, as part of their machine learning, to be able to train their models. They need labeled data, and so they employed a ton of people to label data, the video feed, you know, signals and stuff getting brought back from the cars, to then identify things and help train the models to be more efficient. However, they've made a lot of tooling to make it better. Elon spoke about how they're able to very quickly label. They actually have models with their labeling tooling that they've developed and trained. So essentially, as Tesla has become more efficient and better equipped with automation to label the data, and as the models get better and they don't need as much additional labeled data, like if the data is already sufficiently labeled, then there's not much point in continuing to pay people to label the data. Right. So I'm sure they still probably have some labelers. I doubt they got rid of all of them. But they don't need as many as they had. So they used it as cost cutting. They got rid of some of their physical data labelers, and then they're hiring in other areas. Now, part of it, I don't know this. This is speculative, so I probably shouldn't say this. But I've personally actually developed software around data labeling for machine learning models, and I've done programs where we've had lots of people trained on doing it. And one of the things you do is you actually compare how well the labelers are doing as well. So it's very possible what they did is they said, hey, we have 1,000 labelers. They looked across all of them and said, hey, these 200 or so folks are doing not as good of a job as the other ones, right? They may have been the lowest accurate. They might have the lowest accuracy of the labeling, or maybe it's timing or whatever. And they just cut them off across the board and just said, okay, this section is going away. I don't know that that's true. That would be how I would probably do it, which is, but yeah. So yeah, they laid off some folks. It's unfortunate. Many of them have moved on to other companies, though.
So do you think this is more a result of the optics of Elon making a bunch of comments 2-3 weeks earlier about laying off across the board, and people jumped on this, which maybe normally would have been a non-event?
Right.
This would have usually been a non-event. Yeah, I think this was because Elon talked about laying off people.
Well, you got Elon, but you've also got, Meta doing the same thing in a much cruder way.
Meta.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Facebook. Let's call them for what they are. No,
I'm trying to be politically correct.
I know.
Oh, come on, Mike. Come on. There's a post. There's a commenter on the thread in the TMC. His name is EV Energy. He says they laid off people who do labeling, a job that the Dojo computers should be able to do. It looks like they are just automating the process, which should yield faster improvements in FSD, since the computer can do it faster than human. Yeah, well, do you believe, disagree, or agree, Lewis, about that?
I slightly agree, but mostly disagree. What I'll say about this: the point of data labeling is that the computer models can't label it. If they did, you wouldn't need to label the data in the first place.
Right.
Yep.
So
I get that.
I agree that as your modeling gets better and your labeling tools will get better, it will be able to do a bunch of it automatically. So yes, you shouldn't be like, if you're doing a data labeling project, the data you're labeling today and the data you're labeling 2 years from now should not be the same data. You should be moving to harder and harder data sets to continue labeling. So do I think that the AI should auto be labeling and have no supervision? No. What I imagine they're doing, based on what Elon said, is yes, they have trained some models on various basic scenarios, and those models are labeling the data, and then humans are looking at it and correcting the models.
The trust but verify.
Exactly. So as the models have improved, they probably don't need as many people correcting. That doesn't mean, though, they don't need people labeling more complex scenarios or harder things. This is probably just the bulk of like the easier type of data that they have, because really you're looking for a broad range of scenarios that you're going to label information.
This whole thing is like, it's not a big deal. Like, oh my gosh, lay off. It's more efficient for them to do the way they're going, instead of having a bunch of people doing it. Right. So at the end of the day, we get our FSD sooner. Is what I'm hearing.
It's not going to make your FSD take any longer to get. How about that?
Okay.
It might be more accurate.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have just time for maybe two viewer comments from last episode, but we'll definitely get to one. And this is from our podcast number 14 for you guys and ladies listening. It's from Del Spiva, if I pronounce your name. Says, I have a 98. This is for the FSD beta score. Del Spiva says, I have a 98 in LA, that's pretty good. Let's keep reading
impressive.
why. I keep my new Plaid Model X, it's a SR71, and navigate on autopilot on city streets every moment I can, which is key. And I put on NOAA, navigate on autopilot on freeway on-ramps and keep it on as long as I can. I do take trips twice a week to drive 100 miles or so on the highway and NOAA to bolster my score, but more because I love driving this magnificent beast. Did Lewis write this?
They're not biased at all.
More drive this magnificent beast and use Tidal hi-fi downloads to scrub music. So the stats app tells me how much I need to drive to increase my score, but good scores in major cities can be done. Yes, Dale Spiva, good scores in major cities can be done if you do a couple of miles driving yourself and then quickly put it on navigate on autopilot and then do 100 miles over time. Because what you're saying here is that your 100 miles, that's what's keeping your score in good graces, because technically you're not supposed to get dinged for people jumping in front of you, for quick stops or things like that. So I challenge you, Mr. and Miss Del Spiva, to drive and keep that score without doing 100 miles on autopilot and see where your score is. Come back and tell us what you think, where it is. Because I'm telling you, man, in the mornings on my 3, I get onto the 5, and I gotta crawl all the way over to get to the HOV lane. So I gotta cross 5 or 6 lanes of traffic. Yeah. And so you're trying to inch in, and before you know it, it's like you're too close to someone or whatever.
You get that little warning every time. Yeah, too close, 30 inches.
And I'm trying to ease my way over, so I'm already deemed there before I even get a chance to do it. Now, if you get up in 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 in the morning, where there's not that many people out, and you can grandma onto the thing, then that's a way to do it. But bruh, in LA, it's just it's kind of difficult to do that. I know I asked Lewis and Mike about their scores, and they're pretty good. I'm afraid to get on mine because mine will probably be 88 because the way I drive, it's just crazy, man. So we have one more question that we get to, and then we got to wrap because some of our producers have some other things to do. So Allie 384 says, question: with this recent EAP reintroduction, upgrading to the extra $12,000 FSD package only adds on the traffic light and stop sign control, and coming soon auto steer on city streets. These two functions are still in beta, right? So if I build a car and add the 12,000 FSD package that only includes beta functions on top of the AP and EAP, do I still need to opt in for beta testing, take the 7-day evaluation test, and score a high enough safety score to use them? Or did Tesla get away with that? I assume the latter if they're allowing anyone to purchase for 12,000 only FSD beta features. Hard to keep up. Yes, it is very hard to keep up. Despite what you do, you still got to drive like a grandmother, and you still have to maintain a certain level of safety score. There's no official number, but as low as what Lewis, 94 you mentioned?
The lowest I've seen someone claim was a 93. Now, that doesn't mean that they're still letting folks in with that low of a score.
Right.
So their target was 100,000 testers, and I think what happened was they were letting in, and then they were opening it up and opening it up and opening it up. Now that they've gotten close to that number, or they have roughly, I don't know if they hit that number, they may have tightened it up some. I'm at a 91 right now. I'm hoping to get up there. I think, Mike, you said you're at a 94.
I've been at 94. I've been at 94.
So Mike hasn't gotten in yet at 94, but he might, because they kind of do it at set intervals sometimes. So I would say as long as you can get to a 95, that's probably a safe level of expecting that you should get in whenever they let in more people.
I'll say one thing about driving like a grandma. I may have slowed down my turns a little bit, and I may have reduced my regen a little bit, but they don't track how many G-forces for straight line acceleration.
Right. That was the only good thing about it.
So I've been having a lot of fun getting on the freeway, let me tell you.
That's the only. Once you turn slow and get.
That's right. Well, I told these guys in the green room that one of the things I did is I turned off the high end regen, which helped my score. But more importantly, is I had to readjust my driving where when I make my turn, I tend to accelerate out of my turn and have a lot of fun doing it. And that dinged me hard on aggressive cornering. So I've reduced that, and now the computer is much happier with me. I'm not happy, but the computer's happy. So
yeah. All right, well, gents, today was a very wonderful techie, interesting day. The whole the nuclear thing was very good for me to hear, because I'm very ignorant to it. I'd be the first to admit that. So, Lewis, thanks for the updates on that, and also Mike for your input in it as well. Being 12 years old and writing, to saying, look, I think this is not cool. I think that's pretty cool, man. But this wraps up episode 15 for us today. If you guys are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We want to hear your questions and comments you may have. So please share with them, as we did today, in the podcast section on Tesla Motors Club or in the YouTube comments, and we will get to them if I can keep Lewis and Mike just from getting to their things, because these guys really are very interesting what they have to say. If you would like to support the podcast, please consider becoming a supporting member on the TMC website. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, there are links to those in the description. So for myself, Mark, the lovely Lewis, and the magnificent Mike, and all the guys in the background, Doug and Danny and Adam and Mr. Scraps, we thank you for listening and watching us. We will see you next time. Please stay tuned to the TMC website when our next podcast will be, and we'll see you guys. Jones won. My man Jones won. Thank you for showing up, and Chris and all you guys for commenting. We really appreciate it. Seriously, we really appreciate you being proactive and talking to us, because we want to know what you think. We don't know everything. We just have opinions, but we love to know what you guys think and what you want to say. So thanks for coming out. Until then, we out.